I want to start off with kind of discussing what is carbon fiber, because there seems to be a lot of misconceptions about it. Typically, carbon fiber is made from a petroleum waste product. So after they're done refining all the fuels and plastics and everything off of it, they're left with a almost like a tar-like material. And they take this material and run it through a furnace in very controlled settings. And as they do it, they're pulling it and stretching it and making it tight. And what that does is it burns off the impurities, leaving carbon molecules behind. And the pulling and stretching leaves them in an orderly, nice fashion. And what you end up with is carbon fiber. Now this is actually a toe of carbon fiber. So this actually consists of 6,000 carbon fibers in it. The carbon fiber itself is actually smaller than the human hair. But an important thing about it is how it gets its strength. And because the carbon molecules are all perfectly aligned, it's incredibly strong as you pull on it. It's not strong if you push on it. It's not strong if you pull sideways to it. In fact, here you can see some of the individual carbon fibers come available. You can see it's almost like spider web or hair. And carbon fiber is also, as I mentioned, strong, but it does not like taking bends very well. It's very fragile if you bend it. So as you're designing or building things with carbon fiber, it's incredibly important that you take all this into account. Now what we do here is we'll take the carbon fiber that's aligned, so the manufacturer of this material will take spools of this. They'll take thousands and thousands of these spools and they'll comb out the carbon fiber until it's all nice and straight and side by side with each other. And then they'll coat it with an epoxy. Typically it's an epoxy. There are other resin systems you can use, but what we use is epoxy. This is similar to the epoxy that you buy at the hardware store, except it's a much higher aerospace grade epoxy that's used. And when you're done, you're left with a material or a sheet of material that looks like this. So if I were to take this apart, you can see the individual toe that is being held together by the resin or the epoxy, and that's a very similar to this. But in this case, it actually has a little shape and structure to it. And what is really important about all this is in this form factor, this sheet form factor, we can now cut it into different shapes and we can stack it and we can make what's called a laminate. Now the laminate is similar to this. This is a 1/2 inch thick panel or a composite panel of carbon fiber epoxy. And you can see the different structures. It almost looks like rings of a tree. And how we stack those is very important, because as you remember I mentioned earlier, the strength is really high in tensile mode, very weak in compression mode. So we want to take these and we want to cut it in different shapes. So when we lay it up, it's all in a different orientation to make sure that we have the proper strength and stiffness of the panel. But when all is said and done, we can actually replicate the stiffness and strength of steel. And the real benefit of carbon composites is with the stiffness and strength of steel, we don't have the weight. Here's a great example. Here's a square of steel. And if I were to put it on the scale, you can see it weighs approximately 1,600 grams. If I were to take the same size block of aluminum, which is only about 1/10 of the strength of steel, that same aluminum is about 600 grams. But with carbon fiber, with the strength and stiffness of steel, I only have about 300 grams. So that's a significant difference. So I get this strength, this stiffness, but I lose about 1,300 grams. Now this is exactly why airplane manufacturers are using carbon fiber in their airplanes today. They get this strength, this stiffness, with approximately this weight. Just like everything, carbon fiber comes in different grades or different qualities of material. The original carbon fiber was a standard modulus material, about a 33 million modulus, and that was created back in the 60s. It's been widely produced to this day, and it's improved so much that it has incredibly high strength and a standard modulus of that is steel. It's used a lot in sports equipment, golf shafts, tennis rackets, fishing rods, things like that use a lot of standard modulus material. Excellent material. The aerospace guys were looking for something that was a little bit stronger and stiffer. They don't want deflection and they want incredibly high strength. So they developed an intermediate modulus fiber. And that's the type of fiber that we have here today. This is a intermediate modulus, so we're in the 40 million PSI tensile modulus, and it's incredibly strong. This is a lot of effort goes into making sure the carbon fiber is ultra pure, that the carbon chains are aligned just exactly right, giving it not only an excellent modulus but also excellent strength. You can also go into more stiffer, higher modulus fibers, but you start to lose strength at that point. So this is really the optimum of both strength and stiffness in a carbon fiber. So the material we get is material that the aerospace companies have deemed to be out of spec. It could be out of spec in terms of time, its life. Epoxy cures with age. And so they have a very strict window of when they can use it to ensure a proper cure. It could have fiber variations in it or waviness that's not as straight and as perfect as they want it to be. When the material is out of spec, they typically will discard it. We will intercept it, or we work with them to ensure that we get it before it goes to the landfill. And in this case, the material is really aerospace quality material, but for a 150-yard roll, it may have 2 defects in it that are maybe 6 inches long. For us, since we're making parts that are 2 feet long, not 100 feet long, it's not a problem. We can cut out those defects and use all the high quality, perfect virgin material in making our parts.